Thanks for joining us as we dive headfirst into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. You know the feeling in this news cycle. Alert after alert on your phone, an avalanche of news out of D.C., and we're here to help you sift through all of it. So let's go. From a new face in the governor's race to a controversial ruling by the nation's highest court, a Democratic state lawmaker and a conservative you know well, diving into all of the day's news. And we're also getting into the race for Detroit mayor from a very different perspective. Business guru Mark Lee is in Studio C, talking about if any candidate is really resonating with the business community. We begin with a story concerning LGBTQ rights. Now, the Trump administration is telling the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, better known as 988, to stop offering specialized support for that group. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration says, simply put, the money for what it calls the Press 3 option has run out. It's run dry. And they say they're focusing instead on servicing all people who need help, including LGBTQ folks. Now, according to the New York Times, the stop work order is effective July 17th. The White House claims funding for this service specifically would jeopardize the whole hotline. But the White House Office of Management and Budget had previously claimed that section of the hotline is where kids are encouraged to embrace what it called radical ideology. It's also worth mentioning that in its statement, the T you normally see in LGBTQ, standing for transgender, is omitted altogether, simply saying LGB+. The Trump administration has rolled back, as you know, transgender rights since taking office. While the agency says everyone who calls will still get the help that they need, the ACLU of Michigan says that's simply not enough, and here's why.
To be consistent with this administration's animus towards LGBTQ people. They say that there doesn't need to be a specialized hotline for LGBTQ individuals who are feeling suicidal. And yet we know that, particularly as it relates to young people, disproportionately, they are prone to consider suicide. Not because they're LGBTQ, it's because of society's lack of acceptance. It's because of policies like this that refuse to acknowledge their existence and their ability to be their authentic selves. And so what programs like Trevor Hotline, the Suicide Hotline, addresses specifically the issues and the problems and the challenges that LGBTQ youth face, which are often unique, that heterosexual youth don't necessarily face because they're not targets for discrimination.
This also comes as the U.S. Supreme Court upholds Tennessee's ban on transgender minors getting gender-affirming care. That ruling along ideological lines. The 6-3 ruling effectively protects many efforts by the Trump administration and states to roll back protections for transgender people. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority ruling the law banning puberty blockers and hormone treatments for transgender minors doesn't violate the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. That requires the government to treat similarly situated people the same. It's important to note, though, this ruling does not outright ban gender-affirming care for minors altogether. Now to the conflict between Israel and Iran. The State Department is evacuating non-essential diplomats and their families as the conflict intensifies. This also comes as President Trump says, while he doesn't want to carry out a strike on Iran, he suggests he's ready to act if necessary. He reiterated today that he's looking for Iran's unconditional surrender.
No, they had bad intentions. You know, for 40 years they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, we told you yesterday the Pentagon shifted military aircraft into and around the Middle East. The State Department's also ramping up warnings to American citizens in Israel and around the region. A lot going on, as always, so let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories we're following at this hour, beginning with this. The State Department is restarting the application process for student visas. But there's a catch. All applicants will now have to unlock their social media accounts so the government can review them. The State Department paused applications last month so they could expand social media screening. They're looking for messages they could deem hostile to the United States. Senate Republicans held a hearing today scrutinizing former President Biden's mental fitness while in office. Democrats boycotted the hearing, saying they're armchair diagnosing the former president. Republicans brought in 3 witnesses today to talk about Biden's time in office, but none of those witnesses actually served in the Biden administration. It comes as President Trump claims the Biden administration might have forged the former president's signature, but Trump hasn't provided any evidence of that actually happening. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem will be in Detroit for a policy event this Friday. They'll be talking about the Trump administration's concerns over the Canadian border. It comes just days after Noem was hospitalized for what her spokesperson says was an allergic reaction. The statement said the hospital treatment was just a precaution. Turning now to the tragedy in Minnesota. What you're looking at right now is a funeral procession for former House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark. Just awful. Their remains were taken to a funeral home in Minneapolis. The procession coming after a vigil was held for the Hortmans. Organizers saying it was important to provide a space for the community to come together and grieve.
Talk process behind pulling this off tonight and creating this community event came immediately. We have a heightened awareness of a community that's hurting, a community that's shocked, a community that's asking a lot of questions. And as a church, we feel it's our responsibility, it's also our privilege to answer those questions in a way that doesn't have to come with words, but comes with open doors, open arms to embrace and care for people who are wounded and hurting emotionally.
State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were shot as well. They're expected to survive. The suspect is in custody. Investigators say he had a list with dozens of other lawmakers they say he was targeting. Some of them were Michigan officials. Congresswoman Haley Stevens, Hillary Scholten, and Debbie Dingell confirming they're on the list. And Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson also telling Fox 2 she was on the list as well. We asked you earlier this week what needs to happen to turn down that temperature in our political discourse. We always say this show is all about you, your opinions and your questions. They mean a lot to us on the Pulse. So let's get to some of them right now. Wanda, thanks for writing in. You say support the Constitution, not whoever the president is. Jim says keep an open mind. Not everyone has your experiences and beliefs. We all don't have to drive white hybrid vehicles. Lee Williams, joy, kindness in all directions. Sometimes great minds think alike. Solve problems together. Kindness is so important. And Mary Ann says, realize that bipartisanship and compromise are not evil. Christopher, thanks for writing in. You say disagree with dignity. No name calling or any kind of insults. Great advice. Kindness. Not a novel concept. Well, the decency conversation is one we're taking up right now with Representative Kelly Breen and Jamie Rowe. We're also diving into the hearings surrounding President Biden's mental fitness and if it's just a waste of our time and money. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Joining us now to dive into a number of issues, Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen and conservative commentator Jamie Rowe, both in Studio C here tonight. We thank you both for joining us. Representative, it's good to see you. I know you haven't been on The Pulse, and we just started talking about how people in this country can actually disagree without being disagreeable. You're a lawmaker who passed some legislation in the hallways in Lansing, and a Republican that you know well, after passing bipartisan legislation, did something that shouldn't surprise us.
You know, I think we all need to start with the basics. We all want the same things. We want to be happy, we want to be healthy, we want to be safe, and we just disagree on paths to get there. And one of the most divisive topics is always responsible firearm usage.
Right.
And last term, I worked very, very hard on the extreme risk protection order bills. And a colleague of mine from across the aisle, she did not vote for them. I know there were some Republicans that were supportive, but they didn't vote for them. But after we passed this particular bill that I worked very, very hard on, very proud of it, this woman, she came up to me and she just gave me a huge hug. And she says, I know how hard you worked, and I know you have good intentions. And even though I know she didn't vote for the bill, that meant a lot to me.
Sure.
Because she recognized the humanity in all of it.
Well, that's called as humanity and decency and the way America was meant to be. And unfortunately, we, on both sides in some circles, have lost that. But for the most part, I think most people are still like that. Jamie Rowe, you're very much like that. You're a guy who may disagree with somebody, but wants to have a good conversation. Let's begin the conversation with what we saw in Minnesota that occurred here with the lawmakers. We're talking about the political temperature. And I asked that question on purpose to Representative Breen because she's talking about a Republican who disagreed about guns, who hugged her after they were done doing this particular bill. How important is that to you?
What
the
happened
decency,
in Minnesota?
No, the decency to bring down the temperature, to hear stories like that. That's important,
I think
don't you think?
We have to understand that we're all children of God, right? We're all made in His image, and we can respect each other and we can disagree with each other, but we can still get things done. I worked on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Candace Miller for 14 years. We worked together in bipartisan fashion on so many issues: the Great Lakes, Selfridge Air National Guard Base, the auto industry, many other things where everybody pulled the sled in the same direction. It didn't matter if you had RD after your name, it's that you had the MI after your name and you fight for the home team. And there are a lot of things that we can work together on to get done, and I hope that we can continue to do that going forward.
And protecting our lawmakers like Representative Breen and others that we know out there,
sure.
Republicans and Democrats, that's critical right now. What happened in Minnesota was abhorrent and awful in every way.
Well, I will tell you this. When I was working for Candace Miller, she had a threat against her life, and a vile threat that I can't even explain to you on here. And the person who issued it ended up going to prison. And I just thank God that he went to prison before he
hurt someone.
Before he hurt her or her family. And what happened in Minnesota is just absolutely unacceptable and cannot be tolerated. And hasn't been tolerated. It sure seems like there's been great cooperation between the Minnesota police, who've done a fabulous job in tracking this guy down, and the FBI and others who've been assisting in there. And I know that there's already also federal charges that have been brought against this guy too. So that kind of stuff is unacceptable. And
on both sides of the Representative Breen, we're grateful you're okay. We had Representative Tisdale on yesterday. I know state police and people that we don't know are working to make sure all of you are safe, and we keep praying for your safety, by the way. Let's talk about some of the big news of the day. Biden. Okay, so his mental acuity called into question by many people, Democrats and Republicans. And here we go, looking at a Senate Judiciary hearing in which they're talking about that. So many Democrats didn't show up. Two did, two senators, one walked out. Do you think it's important to focus a little bit on Biden and what we perhaps didn't find out about him in the last few months in office?
Well, I can say I personally am focused on the problems that we have now. And no matter who is in power, the administration is going to want to take credit for anything good that happens, and they're going to want to blame the prior administration for anything bad that happens, no matter what. But in this particular instance, I would agree that it was proper for Senate Democrats to not show up. This was not designed to help anybody, but to embarrass. And nobody there is a medical expert. You didn't have anybody who treated the president. And there's a lot of other issues that we could be addressing that are going to help Americans right now. And I think that we should be focused on what is going to make people's lives better. Before I say anything or I do anything, I always want to ask myself, who is this going to help? And if I can't come up with a good answer, I try not to say it, although my mouth does get me in trouble occasionally. Or I try not to do it. It is everybody. You know, I just hope we can move forward and focus on the issues that are problematic now.
It is a little bit interesting to see the Senate Judiciary Committee meet and take time on taxpayers' dime to talk about the former president and his mental acuity. Jamie, more important issues to talk about, or do you think this was appropriate?
Well, I think that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They're already working on the one big beautiful bill, which I hope gets done here before the 4th of July. But the fact of the matter is, this is an issue that has to be examined. The fact of the matter is...
Why do you think that's important, Jamie?
Because we need to understand, and I think the hearings that are coming in the House, where we're going to have actual members of the Biden administration that are going to be in there testifying, was the president, elected president of the United States, actually making the calls on actions that were taking in his name? Because if he was not making those calls, that is a tremendous problem for this nation and cannot be allowed to happen. It could be criminal.
Is that a conspiracy, though, because of the auto pen issue, or is this something that is just conjecture? I mean, how do we really know? And I know that you may say that that's what the Judiciary Committee should be looking into, but the president, there's no real proof right now that he wasn't running the show.
I think we're going to get that proof. This is why the House Oversight Committee is calling in members of the Biden administration, including the president's former doctor, and they are going to get asked those questions. And others who served in the administration are also going to be called to testify, and are going to have to testify truthfully. You know, we saw the Jake Tapper book where you had all these nameless sources out there saying all of these terrible things that were done, and how the president was clearly not up to the job. President Biden wasn't up to the job. And we need to know better, because that cannot be allowed to happen.
Representative Breen, when you hear this, talking a little bit about what, looking back is important, he's saying, because at some level you have to know who was running the show, and if there was some kind of a conspiracy, then we should look into it. Is that something that you give any air to at all?
Unfortunately, I have to disagree with Jamie here. And I think we can both agree we don't want anybody who is not mentally competent running the country. However, when you talk about anonymous sources and a lot of conjecture right here, it seems more like it's a problem that doesn't exist. Or maybe it's a solution in search of a problem. I don't think that this is something that is worth examining. I don't believe there's any actual evidence. And if there was, I cannot believe that there would be a conspiracy so vast that every cabinet member or all these particular people that were involved with the Biden administration were all in on. It does not seem feasible. Last
question with a minute left. We can get 30 seconds apiece here. Talk about the governor's race for a moment. I want to hear from you, Representative Breen. Who sticks out right now in your head as someone who is kind of really making a viable message to the people of Michigan?
I think we're actually kind of lucky to have a lot of very good candidates to choose from on both sides. And I look forward to getting to know some of the other candidates personally. I think Tom Leonard entering the race, I know him personally. I think he's actually a really nice guy. And he's somebody that, if he were to win, I could work with. But that's just the only particular Republican that I actually know. But the Democratic field is big.
It's very big.
And a lot of great people to choose from.
So is the independent field, right? I mean, Governor, going for the good job of governor is Mike Duggan. His chances.
Yeah, we're having a chat about that earlier, and I think Mayor Duggan has a tough uphill climb as an independent, because we have straight ticket voting in Michigan, which means that the independent candidates are going to have a very difficult time overcoming the Republican or the Democrat. But I'm happy with the great crop of candidates that we have on the Republican side.
Who sticks out to you on the Republican side?
I think John James obviously is somebody who has been riding at the top so far. Eric Nesbitt, who is the Senate Republican leader, is a friend of mine and somebody who I think would make a great governor. If you were to get there, I've known Tom Leonard well, and Tom is a wonderful guy. Mike Cox is another one who is a friend, and I just think that we have a set of riches right now, and I think the field could get larger. So we'll see what happens.
You're hearing a Democrat and a Republican say we have good candidates on both sides of the aisle, and so the choice ultimately is yours. Thanks for your time here, Jamie. Representative Breen, thanks for joining us on The Pulse. Well, the race for mayor is heating up, but which candidate is catching the eye of the business community? What do they need to say? We're finding out next. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Still on. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. Here to talk about the race for mayor from a business perspective. Business owner and guru, Mark Lee. And Mark, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The
Thanks
Pulse.
for having me back.
All right, so we have many people out there who we've been hearing from on television. They say, hey, I want your vote. I want to be the next mayor of Detroit. What are they missing in terms of a conversation piece that the business community really needs to hear?
We're not hearing any plans right now. I know it's still relatively early. It's not relatively early. It's getting closer to the primary. And I think what's missing, your specific plans in terms of addressing the challenges that the small business and the business community is having in Detroit. So, for example, last night I talked to 30 people, 30 business owners. And my question was, what do you want to hear? And I think people want to hear specifics as it relates to supporting the businesses, right? How do you continue to simplify the process of starting a business and growing a business in Detroit? What financial resources are out there? And as I continue to struggle with my local/small business, what resources are out there for me? So I think we're missing specifics at this point.
What are the big challenges that Detroit businesses are facing that these mayoral candidates can help address?
Access to capital. All right, we still have this uncertainty with the tariffs. We have the uncertainty with the economy. And the uncertainty level for small businesses right now is at a record high. It's at the highest point since 1986. And so I think what they're looking for is someone to reassure them, give them the confidence. Say, hey, from a financial perspective, we have resources, we have grants, we have programs. You know, some of those started under Mayor Duggan, give him his credit. And I think what businesses are saying is, how are you going to take it to the next level? And they feel that that's missing right now.
Well, that's something that if you're watching any of the candidates, there are 30 businesses that you talk to said this is what we want to hear, and we're not hearing it, and that's important. So the first one to get on board with this could be the one that actually attracts small business owners. And small businesses really are, in many ways, the backbone of so many pieces and parts of the city, wouldn't you say?
There are 62,000 small businesses in the city of Detroit.
Wow.
In terms of volume, we're the fourth largest city in the country with 62,000. That's according to the U.S. Census data from a few years ago, but that's the most recent data. And so if you're talking about 1 to 3 employees, you're talking upwards of close to 200,000 jobs that are being generated. So yes, small businesses are not just the economic backbone for Detroit, but also across the country. They create 60 to 70% of the net new jobs. We love our big corporations, no question about that. Absolutely, we love them here in Detroit, but small businesses are the economic generators of this city.
We saw Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, head to the White House not once, but 3 times to talk to President Trump about getting business done for Michigan. How important is it for the next mayor of Detroit to understand the importance of working with Washington to make sure that things
take the politics out of it, take the optics out of it? From a business perspective, you want to have a relationship with Washington, D.C. All right, let's go back for a second. I know a different administration, but Mayor Duggan had a relationship with Washington, D.C. The dollars were flowing in, and so I think what Governor Whitmer's doing is saying, look, I'm working for all people of Michigan. So from a business perspective, I would implore the mayors, the candidates right now, if you want to certainly have a successful administration here in Detroit, you have to have a relationship with Washington, D.C., because those federal dollars are important. And a lot of small businesses rely on the federal grants. They rely on those economic funds to make them, to allow them to invest in business and grow long term as well.
Last question I have for you is about the future of the city of Detroit when it comes to the business infrastructure. Obviously, the next mayor is going to have a huge piece and part in that, but the next governor will as well. Talk for a moment about the importance of that race and how it influences the city of Detroit.
However Detroit goes, the state goes. And certainly we want to have somebody in Lansing that has a very strong relationship with the mayor of Detroit and vice versa. So they have to figure out how to work together, make sure they understand the common issues, the challenges, not for just the city of Detroit, but for the state of Michigan. Put together policies and plans in place that will continue to focus on long-term sustainability and growth. That's really the bottom line, and that's what the business community is looking for right now.
What is it that Detroit can do better in order to attract and retain talent?
We have to make sure we do a better job of communicating, right? Why it makes sense to do business here. Right now, we still, from a perceptual standpoint, we have challenges. And so the biggest challenge is how do we begin to continue to turn around that perception? It is turning around, right? We still so much economic development coming in, but the bottom line is continue to tell Detroit's story.
You saw Woody Harrelson and Joe Rogan chatting about Detroit on Joe Rogan's podcast the other day, and he was high on Detroit. Woody Harrelson was.
Detroit,
he was
real
very
quick,
excited.
is one of the hottest cities in the country. Let's leverage that.
You know what, Mark? It's good to see you. We always thank you for your perspective here on The Pulse. Thanks for your time. That is The Pulse for tonight. Remember to email us your political questions or a fact check you'd like to see. ThePulse@Fox.com, or you can scan that QR code right there at the bottom of your screen. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was good to be with you.